Welcome back, America. You know, Gene Hamilton is an unsung hero. He is the co-founder and president of America First Legal, which is doing a fantastic job. Co-founder with Steve Miller. And he's former White House deputy counsel under President Trump in the second term here. He's just a superb lawyer. And full disclosure, he knows how to hire people, you know, because my wife is senior counsel over there, and they're doing a hell of a great job. Gene Hamilton, I want to start with this issue of Obama and Clinton, and really, in my view, one of the great crimes of the century, the way they went after Trump's campaign, Trump and his Trump presidency. We have a lot of lawyers out there, smart people. Some of them are my friends. Maybe we read these opinions a little differently, like on immunity, that July 1 opinion of last year. I could have sworn I saw a phrase in there, presumptive immunity. I didn't see just absolute immunity every single time. Am I missing something, or is there presumptive immunity and Obama would have to overcome, or the government would have to overcome presumptive immunity, but it doesn't mean it's strict immunity? Am I right about that?
Mark, you are correct about that. The Supreme Court described kind of three different scenarios, to the best of my recollection. One was absolute immunity. So those were the things that were within the core of the president's constitutional powers and duties to carry out. Then there was also presumptive immunity for the other duties that he carries out throughout the course of his tenure as president, other official acts. And then, of course, there are the third category being there is no immunity for things that are purely private in nature, things that weren't related to the duties of the office. And so, to your point, when we're talking about somebody who served as the president of the United States, the notion that just because they were president while they were doing something doesn't make their activities, of course, completely off limits.
Yeah, and in this case, we're talking about a president in December of 2016 who basically ordered his CIA director to change the assessment of Russia involvement and who Russia was for, even though the original assessments said that they're not really helping Trump, and their involvement, yes, they're involved, but it's not really affecting the outcome of the election. So they changed the assessment in record time at the direction of the then director of the CIA, at his direction by Obama. Now, let me ask you this. You worked at the White House. Is that in the usual course of a president's business to have the CIA reverse an assessment and kick it out in less than a month?
Usually in the ordinary course of business at the White House, if you're going to rely on something that is a product of the intelligence community, you are going to give them time. They're going to weigh different assessments, viewpoints throughout the community, and then they'll come together and they'll put together an assessment that assesses things with high degrees of confidence, low degrees of confidence, and everywhere in between. The president ultimately is the person who gets to decide what weight to afford to which viewpoints. But to run through something in a hurried fashion, to preordain and select different assessments from different aspects of the intelligence community, only the ones that support your conclusion, and to dismantle and diminish and hide the other ones is the epitome of really problematic issues that we have in this country, especially when it comes to something like this. We have the President of the United States who is trying to advance a pre-written script about the 2016 election. The totality of the circumstances, the totality of the evidence did not support the conclusion that they wanted, and so they went through with this alternate path. They went through with this alternate idea and reality and advanced it, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, suffered for 4 years because of it in his first term.
Amen. Very well said. And I would say this to anyone who's listening out there: no president has immunity from investigation. So that's the key part. You know, people are talking about, Gene, what law did they break and so forth and so on. I have a better idea. Why don't you gather the evidence and the information and see what took place? Because there's other crimes leading up to this, which could be obstruction. It could be a whole bunch of things. And I feel the Department of Justice will do that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.